Last lesson we named the disease and the medicine. Today we go deep on the medicine itself, overlays, the single most important idea in this series. By the end of this lesson, you will know exactly what an overlay is, and you will implement one in both Helm and Kustomize. You will also learn the one rule that keeps a shared base clean: capabilities, not environments. So what is an overlay? It is two things stacked together. A base layer, shared and identical for everyone. Plus one thin layer per environment, the overlay itself, which carries only that environment's deltas. When you render, you stack the base and the overlay, and out comes finished YAML. Nothing is duplicated. The common parts live once, in the base. Hold this picture. One base at the top, environment agnostic, identical for every tenant. Under it, three thin overlays: dev, test, and prod. Each overlay adds only its small deltas. From that one base plus three layers, you render three complete, different sets of manifests. This single shape is the foundation of everything else in the series. How does Helm do overlays? With values files. Values.yaml is your base layer, the defaults. Values.prod.yaml is your prod overlay, only the deltas. You layer them by passing multiple -f flags to Helm template, in order. Later files override earlier ones. So the prod file only needs to contain what differs from the base. Everything else is inherited. See it flow. The base values file goes in, the prod overlay values file goes in, and Helm template merges them. Overlay wins where they disagree, and out comes the rendered prod YAML. The chart templates never change. The only thing that differs between environments is which values files you layer together. Here it is in code. The base values file sets replica count to 1 and disables the security scan, a safe default. The prod overlay file only states the deltas, replica count 3, security scan on. Notice the overlay says nothing about images, ports, or anything else it agrees with the base on. That is the whole point, deltas only. Rendering is one line: you point Helm template at the chart, then pass the base values file, then the prod overlay values file. Helm reads them in order, the overlay overrides the base, and the merged result is your prod manifests. Swap values prod for values dev, and you get dev. Same chart, same templates, different overlay. There is one rule that makes this reusable. The base never names an environment. Instead, it exposes capabilities: security scan enabled, multi-zone enabled, auto-scaling enabled. The overlays simply turn those capabilities on or off. The prod overlay sets security scan to true, the dev overlay leaves it false. Same base, different choices. That is what lets one trunk serve every tenant. Why does this rule matter so much? If the base contained the word prod, then dev could not reuse it, the base would be biased. Capabilities are environment agnostic by design. Security scanning is either on or off, regardless of what you call the environment. The overlay is the only place an environment name ever appears. That separation is exactly why one trunk can serve everyone safely. Here are the overlay commands in Helm. To render each environment, you always pass the base values file first, then the environment overlay. Lint the chart before you render. And the most useful habit of all, diff the dev render against the prod render, so you can see exactly which deltas the prod overlay introduces. Base plus overlay. Deltas only. Always. Kustomize does overlays even more explicitly. You have a base folder with the common YAML, and an overlays folder with one subfolder per environment. Each overlay has a customization.yaml that references the base and lists its patches. You render with kubectl kustomize. The word overlay is literally baked into the tool. See it flow. The base folder goes in, the prod overlay, its patch and its customization file, goes in, and kubectl kustomize merges them into one set of prod manifests. Same promise as Helm, different mechanism. Helm layers values files, Kustomize layers folders of YAML and patches. Here is the Kustomize base. A customization file that simply lists the common resources, a deployment and a service. No environment names anywhere. This base is what every overlay will build on top of. It is the Kustomize equivalent of Helm's base values file, but as real, plain Kubernetes YAML. And here is the prod overlay. Its customization file references the base, ///base, and lists a patch file. That patch file contains only the prod deltas, like replica count 3. The overlay adds nothing else. The base does all the heavy lifting, the overlay just nudges the differences. Rendering means pointing kubectl kustomize at one overlay folder. For prod, you get the base plus the prod patch, merged. For dev, the same base plus the dev patch. Same base every time, only the overlay folder changes. That is the entire Kustomize overlay loop. Here are the overlay commands in Kustomize. To render an environment, point kubectl customize at that overlay folder. To apply, use kubectl apply with the -k flag. And again, the power move, diff the dev overlay render against the prod overlay render, to see precisely what prod changes about the shared base. Same base. Different overlays. Same discipline. Here is the payoff of doing overlays right. Render dev and prod from the same base, then diff the two outputs. The diff shows only what the prod overlay changes, nothing more, nothing less. That diff is your entire review surface for a production change. It is tiny, it is clear, and it fits in a pull request. Contrast that with copy pasting across branches. Picture the review. The same base renders into dev and into prod. When you diff those two renders, what you see is exactly and only the deltas the prod overlay introduces: replicas, resources, a security scan. That tiny diff is what a reviewer reads before approving a prod change. Overlays turn a scary, environment spanning change into a small, legible one. Put the two side by side. The base is values.yaml in Helm, the base folder in Customize. The overlay is a second values file in Helm, an overlay folder in Customize. The difference mechanism is value overrides in Helm, patches in Customize. And the render command is 2-f flags versus 1 customize path. Same idea, two syntaxes. If you remember one rule from this lesson, remember this: capabilities, not environments. The base is environment agnostic. Overlays are the only place an environment name ever appears. Capabilities, like security scanning or multi-zone, are flipped on or off per overlay. That discipline is what makes one shared trunk reusable by every tenant, safely. Capabilities, not environments. That is the rule. Here is how to practice right now. Take any small chart or base you already have. Add a values prod.yaml for Helm, or an overlays/prod folder for Customize. Render both environments and diff them. Confirm, with your own eyes, that the diff contains only the deltas. Once you have done that once, the overlay idea is yours forever. Quick recap. An overlay is a base plus thin per environment deltas. In Helm, that is base values plus end values, layered with -f. In Customize, it is a base folder plus an overlays folder with patches. The governing rule is capabilities, not environments. And the proof that you did it right: the diff between two environments is exactly and only the deltas. A small exercise to cement it. Add a fourth overlay, call it staging. Give it deltas that sit somewhere between dev and prod. Render it, and diff it against prod. Notice how very little you had to write, just the deltas, because everything else is inherited from the base. That lightness is the whole point of overlays. Write the deltas. Inherit the rest. Overlays, the heart of the whole series. That is overlays, the heart of the series. Next, we put them to work on real use cases, starting with environment configuration differences.